All right, let's dive into one of the biggest questions out there for anyone with a dream. How do you actually fund your business? Today, we're going to break down that whole journey, from that first little spark of an idea all the way to becoming a massive success story.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You get that light bulb moment. An idea so good, you can practically taste the success. Maybe it's a new app, or a service nobody's thought of, or some kind of game-changing product. It just feels like a total winner.
And then, bam, reality hits. That amazing idea, it needs fuel to get off the ground. It needs capital. And honestly, figuring out where to get that money can feel like this huge, impossible wall. Well, don't worry. Today, we're going to build the ladder to get right over it.
To make all this real, let's meet our entrepreneur. We'll call her Maya. Now, Maya has this awesome dream. She wants to open her own gourmet taco food truck. She's got the recipes perfected, but to turn that dream into delicious, real-life tacos, she's going to need some finance. Her journey is the perfect way for us to understand why any business needs cash.
So first things first, Maya can't really have a food truck business without, the truck. This is her first massive hurdle. It's a huge one-time purchase, and it's absolutely essential for her to even begin to sell a single taco.
And this is a perfect example of our first big concept, capital expenditure. Just think of it as the money you spend on the big, long-lasting stuff. For Maya, it's the truck itself and all the kitchen gear inside. These are the assets that are going to serve her business for years and years.
Okay, so Maya's got the truck. Great. But a shiny truck doesn't magically make tacos. She needs ingredients, right? The tortillas, the meat, the salsa, all those avocados. Plus, she needs gas to drive the truck and propane for the grill. These are the costs she's going to be dealing with every single day.
And that brings us to our second key idea, revenue expenditure. This is basically the money that keeps the lights on, the engine running day in and day out. It's the cost of her ingredients, maybe wages for an employee down the line, and the fuel she burns. It's literally the cost of doing business.
So what's so cool about this slide is how it just ties everything together perfectly. See, every single business, whether it's Maya's little food truck or some giant tech company, needs money for these exact reasons. You need startup costs to get going, expansion capital to grow, and working capital for that daily grind. And it's all covered by those two types of spending we just talked about, capital and revenue expenditure.
Okay, so Maya gets it. She knows why she needs the money. The big question now is, where on earth does she get it? This is where the real funding journey kicks off.
When you boil it all down, Maya really has two places to look for cash. There's internal finance, which is pretty much money from her own pockets. And then there's external finance, money from, you guessed it, other people's pockets. It sounds simple, but that distinction is absolutely crucial.
For most brand new entrepreneurs like Maya, the journey starts internally. She could dip into the personal savings she's been building up for years, or maybe she could sell something she owns but doesn't really need anymore. The best part? It's usually fast, and there's no interest to pay back.
Okay, let's fast forward. Maya did it. She used her savings, bought the truck, and she's officially in business. And guess what? Her tacos are a massive hit. But now she's hit a new snag. She has to buy all her ingredients for the week on a Monday, but she doesn't really see that cash come in from customers until, say, Friday. She's profitable, but she's in a cash flow crunch. And this, right here, is why working capital is so incredibly important. It's the money that fills that gap between when you have to pay your bills and when you actually get paid. People call it the lifeblood of a business for a reason. In fact, running out of working capital is one of the top reasons that even really popular, profitable new businesses end up failing.
So how does Maya solve this weekly cash flow headache? Well, the answer is a whole category of funding designed for exactly this kind of problem. We're talking short-term finance.
Probably one of her best bets is a good old bank overdraft. It's this super flexible tool that lets her bank account dip into the negative for a little while, so she can pay her suppliers on Monday without a problem, and then everything gets settled up once all that Friday taco money starts rolling in.
All right, let's jump ahead a couple of years. Maya's Tacos is now a local legend. Seriously, there are lines around the block every day. Business is so good that she decides it's time to go big. It's time to expand and open a second food truck in a different part of the city.
Now, buying a whole other truck and getting it all kitted out, that's a major capital expenditure. Her little daily overdraft is not going to cut it for this. For these huge growth ambitions, she needs a totally different class of funding, long-term finance. So for this, she could go back to the bank and ask for a much bigger multi-year loan. Or, and this is a big step, If she decides to incorporate her business to make it a limited company, she could actually sell shares, little pieces of ownership in her taco empire to investors to raise the cash.
But what if the bank says no? Maybe they look at her plan and think a second food truck is just too risky. Is that it? Is Maya's dream of expansion over? No way. Not even close. Let's look at some really powerful alternative routes that have popped up in recent years. First, let's just take a moment to look at the incredible power of something called microfinance. This is the story of Praveen Baji in Pakistan. With 9 kids, she was really struggling just to feed her family. Of course, no traditional bank would even think about lending her money. But a microfinance organization gave her a loan for just $70. With that tiny amount, she started a jewelry-making business. Today, she owns multiple businesses, she employs 8 people, and she sends her children to college. It just goes to show you how a very small amount of capital can have a truly life-changing impact.
Okay, now for another modern option, crowdfunding. This is where Maya could hop online, share her amazing plan for truck number 2, and ask her loyal customers and just the general public to invest small amounts of money to help make it happen. Exactly like this restaurant, Chilango, did to get started. And don't for a second think this is just some niche little idea. Crowdfunding is one of the fastest growing ways for startups to get money. Back in 2015 alone, a mind-blowing $34 billion were raised around the world this way. It is a very serious option. Phew, okay, so we've looked at a ton of options, right? Everything from personal savings to selling shares to getting money from the crowd. So how does an entrepreneur like Maya, or maybe even you, choose the right path? Let's build a really simple roadmap for making that decision. The first, and honestly the most important question is, what's the money for? The golden rule here is to match the source of the money to the length of the need. You wouldn't take out a 10-year loan to buy ingredients for next week, right? So for short-term needs, you use short-term finance. For long-term assets, you go for long-term finance. Simple.
This next one is a huge deal. It's the classic trade-off between debt and equity. If you take a loan, that's debt. You have to pay it back with interest, but you keep 100% ownership of your company. If you sell shares, that's equity. You get cash you don't have to repay, but it means selling off a piece of your company and giving up some of that control.
And this fantastic diagram really lays out the whole framework. You have to balance the purpose and the amount you need against how much control you're okay with giving up, the financial risk you're taking on, and the current status. The size and stage of your business. Using this as a guide helps you find the absolute perfect funding fit for you.
So there you have it. We've gone from a simple idea for a food truck all the way to a full-on expansion. And we've looked at just about every type of funding along the way. We figured out the key terms and laid out a really clear framework for making the right choice. The roadmap is now in your hands. So the only question left is, what are you going to build?